Hi, I'm Alora. I'm sure I will have some readers who have a lot of allergies. Well, I'm someone who has 12 allergies in total. Yep, might sound crazy to some, but it is what it is. I genuinely don't have much problem with food because I am a good cook and can make amazing dishes with substitutes. So that wasn't a problem for me when I was older. My problem was with people who didn't take my allergies seriously. I can remember more than one incident when someone hadn't taken my allergies seriously, and it had landed me in a hospital. Thankfully, most people around me weren't that dismissive or ignorant. I'm telling you all this because it is important to my story. My husband, Brian, has his mother, Harper, and sister, Riley. His father passed away when he was in school, and after that, he sort of became the man of the family. I find these concepts ridiculous, but whatever, different families operate differently, I guess. The problem was that Harper and Riley didn't like me at all. They resented me from the very beginning because they thought I was a threat to their relationship with Brian. I seriously haven't done a single thing to deserve this treatment, but it was what I got. Even after Brian and I got married, they didn't become comfortable with me. I stopped trying to have a close relationship with them, and eventually we became distant. I must admit that I didn't think they were a big problem because Harper lived 2 cities over, and Riley stayed with her husband. Riley and her husband lived in our city, but we didn't keep in contact a lot. We were happy being the 2 of us. But one day, my husband sat me down and said, "Hey, would you mind if my mom moved in with us?" "Why? What happened, Brian?" "Her landlord is selling the property, so he kicked her out. She tried to find a place to stay, but she couldn't afford the rent anywhere else. She asked me if I would let her stay, since she wanted to live closer to us anyway." "Oh, I see. Well, I don't have a problem, but please don't let her be too snarky with me." "I will keep that in mind, my dear. Don't worry, I won't let her be mean to you." "Okay then, you can tell her that she can come stay with us." My husband thanked me for being cooperative and told his mother that she could stay in our home. We had the space, so that wasn't an issue. Was I thrilled about having Harper in my home? No, but I didn't want to leave her homeless. I'm not that heartless, guys. I thought I could always talk to my husband and ask her to leave if she acted up or caused problems. With that logic in mind, I allowed her to stay with me. Oh boy, that wasn't the right decision because this woman was absolutely crazy. I had no idea the extent of my mother-in-law's hate for me until she came to live with us. Initially, we started off without a problem, even though she was a bit cold towards me. But soon, we started to have problems. First of all, she was living with us for free and didn't even pay utilities. Secondly, she kept inviting her daughter over every other day, and it felt like Riley was practically living with us. It was hard for me because I would always find them ready to bully me whenever I was back from work. Brian tried to talk to his mother and asked her to tone down this behavior. However, Harper just did what she wanted since he worked long hours and couldn't keep an eye on her 24/7. Just a month into her stay, I was already tired of her. The biggest problem we had was Harper being dismissive of my allergies. We had sat her down to tell her some ground rules about the food we had. It was about my allergies and how she needs to be careful with certain foods around me. I can't eat a variety of foods because of my allergies, and I can get a reaction even through cross-contamination. So Brian and I gave her a list of my allergies and said, "You need to limit bringing these things into our house, Harper. You can eat it if you want, but make sure it is not in the fridge. If you want to cook something with these ingredients, make sure to scrub everything clean and leave no chance for cross-contamination." What the hell, Alora? There are 12 items on this list. No one has these many allergies. Well, I do, Harper. People can have even more than a dozen allergies. It's not common, but we exist. I don't believe it, Alora. You're just being controlling and a drama queen. It's impossible to have so many allergies. Mom, that's not how allergies work, and Alora really cannot eat these things. We're not banning you from having them. Just make sure you clean everything later so it doesn't get into her food. This is nonsense, Brian. You know this is all a lie. Your sister only has one allergy, so you should know that people can only be allergic to one thing. Your daughter's case is not applicable to everyone, Harper. Look it up if you want. I am also allergic to shellfish, but it's not the only allergy I have, as you can see. I still don't believe you, Alora. You're only doing this because you want me to clean your kitchen for free. All this dealing with your allergies is just your attention-seeking behavior coming through. Mom, stop it. You will not talk to my wife like that. We're being pretty reasonable here. You have no right to call my wife names for having allergies. You will follow our boundaries if you stay in this house. This is a serious matter, and I need you to treat it like that. My mother-in-law tried to argue and told Brian that she didn't know anyone who had multiple allergies. She said some weird stuff about allergies that would make a doctor faint. Anyway, after a lot of arguments, my husband and I put our foot down and told her in no uncertain terms that she needed to follow this rule. Harper huffed and agreed to do what we asked, but she made it clear that she still thought I was being controlling and an attention seeker. It was just bizarre, but I knew there was no point in arguing with her. One day, I did tell Brian that I was feeling overwhelmed by everything. I said, "Your mother is a nightmare, Brian. I don't know why she has to act this way." "I know, Alora. I'm so sorry she's bothering you." It really doesn't help that Riley keeps coming over and joins Harper in making my life hell. Just last week, we got into a fight because they made soy milk coffee and didn't wash the pan with soap. You have no idea how badly they argued with me. I knew about this already, Alora. Mom came to complain, and I put her in her place. If your mother doesn't take my allergies seriously, we are going to have problems, Brian. I really feel unsafe in my own house because of Harper's nonchalant attitude. I see I'll try to talk to her again, Alora. If I see that she's not willing to follow the rules, we will revisit this topic and come up with a serious solution. My husband always took my health seriously, so I was confident that he wouldn't tolerate Harper's ignorant attitude if things got worse. At that time, I was going to compromise and see if we could somehow learn to get along. Kicking Harper out the first chance we had wasn't really an option. It might come easy to a lot of people, but it doesn't come that easy to me. I didn't want to ruin my husband's relationship with his family over nothing. The least I could do is give her a chance and see if Harper eventually changes her attitude. A month went by and things were still tense at home. Harper was always a problem, but Riley's presence was making it worse. She, despite having allergies herself, also took her mom's side and said that she didn't believe me. I didn't know that a grown woman from the 21st century could be so dumb and uninformed. Again, I didn't feel like arguing with her, so I didn't bother anymore. They had a great time berating me and insulting me at home when no one was around. I let it be and figured that ignoring would be the best option. I also made my own food because I knew Harper would be careless, since she didn't think my allergies were real. She never bothered to cook for me anyway, so when she suddenly made me food, I was taken aback. I was back home from work and dead tired. I hadn't eaten anything since morning and was dying for some food. I avoided eating out because of my allergies, so my only option was to eat at home. I was dreading making a meal while so tired when my mother-in-law came into the kitchen and said that she had made me food. She said, "I made you some soup, Alora. I thought you would be tired today, so I made you something to eat." Oh, you didn't have to, Harper, but thanks, I guess. Here, go ahead and drink it. It'll warm you up. You didn't use anything that I'm allergic to, right? Oh, no, no, it's just my special tomato soup, Alora. I use a special recipe that's been passed down in my family. You don't have to worry, though. I remembered all your allergies and didn't use anything you can't eat. Harper said these words very fast, as if she had rehearsed this in her head. She was acting a little off, and I found her behavior a little suspicious. She let me know that Riley was coming over, so she was going to freshen up. Then she left for her room. I was very confused and had a bad feeling about this. Harper never made me food and didn't even agree that I have allergies. I knew something was wrong with the food Harper gave me. It smelled like it had something on it that I didn't eat. I looked at it rather suspiciously and was deciding whether or not it would be a good idea to eat it. My gut told me that this food shouldn't be in my stomach at all, so I sat there in silence and looked at my food like it was out to get me. It sure looked delicious, but I was very hesitant to even have a taste. While I was suspiciously eyeing the food, Riley came into the dining room. She took one look at the food and said, "Hey, what's that?" "What are you eating? Where did you get that?" "Your mother made this for me, Riley. It's soup, as you can see." "That looks delicious. Are you sure she made this for you? She never cooks you anything. You must be lying." "Yes, she is the one who made this for me." "I don't see any more soup on the counter. Mom must have saved this portion for me, and you decided to steal it." "Why would I do that, Riley? You know I can't eat everything that your mom cooks because of my allergies." "Don't start that again, Alora. Everyone knows that you're just faking your allergies. No one can have so many allergies. Just admit that you stole my portion of the soup. You can believe what you may, Riley. The truth is that your mother gave me this soup because I was hungry and tired from work. But if you think I'm lying and stealing your portion, you can have this. Yes, I'm going to take this food away from you because it should belong to me. You don't deserve such a delicious meal anyway." "By all means, Riley, go ahead and take it." I decided to give away the food to Riley because she was being sassy again. She apparently believed that this soup was meant for her and I was stealing it. She didn't hesitate to take up my offer when I said that she could have it. I guess she found this soup to look too delicious too, since I was already having trouble deciding if I should eat it. I gave it away to her. I happily passed the bowl to Riley, who sat down and started to drink it in one go. She was satisfied to have the delicious-looking food taken away from me. I just sat there and watched her eat it, trying to understand if I was the only one who found the food suspicious. Riley was drinking the soup and had finished half the bowl fairly soon. I thought that maybe nothing was wrong with the soup, but in a few moments I saw Riley start to stop eating and look a little stunned. She looked at me and back at the soup in panic. I also noticed that she was turning red. She tried to speak but couldn't talk. I immediately knew what was happening, and my eyes went wide at the realization. I immediately called 911 and then my mother-in-law. When Harper came into the kitchen, she looked shocked to see her own daughter choking up. Immediately, she ran to her side and asked me, "What is wrong here? What happened to her? She had the soup that you gave me, and then this happened." "What did you just say? You gave her the food I gave you." "Yes, Harper." "What did you mix in it? She looks like she's having an allergic reaction." "Oh God, I put shellfish in the soup. She shouldn't have eaten it." "Oh God, Riley baby, don't worry, we'll take you to the hospital now." Harper was scared out of her mind as her daughter was choking and gasping for air. Riley was only coming to visit for a short time, so she didn't bring her EpiPen with her. Our only option was to get her to the hospital as fast as we could. Harper was crying out of fear and frustration while I just stood there in shock. I had already called an ambulance, so we were just waiting for it to come. Riley looked bad, and even I felt bad for her. No matter what, she didn't deserve to die like that. She wasn't the one who tried to trick me after all. I couldn't really blame her for her mom's actions, especially when she didn't even know her plan or was a part of it. Within a few minutes, the ambulance arrived, and Riley was taken to the hospital. Harper went with her while I took my car there. I also called Brian over and explained to him that his sister was in the hospital. When I was sitting at the hospital waiting for my husband to arrive, I had time to think about what Harper did. My instincts weren't wrong. My mother-in-law did put something in the soup and had specifically made it for me. That's why she didn't have any leftovers for her daughter, even though she knew Riley was coming over. She also took extra care to scrub her utensils and kitchen clean, because she didn't want her daughter to risk getting exposed to shellfish. She didn't care if I had died because she was sure I was faking my allergies for attention. This woman was absolutely crazy, and I didn't even know what to say. I was mad, I tell you, but I also was feeling very unsafe to be around her. Thankfully, she was busy being worried about her daughter and forgot about me entirely while we waited for the doctors to deal with Riley. Brian arrived. As soon as he came in, he said your stupid wife gave her seafood soup and sent her to the ER. My poor baby could have died. What on earth are you talking about, Mom? Why would Alora even buy seafood soup? She can't eat that. Alora, tell me what's going on. I didn't buy seafood soup or make it, Brian. It was given to me by your mother. She didn't even tell me that she put shellfish in it. What? Why would you do that, Mom? You know my wife is allergic to seafood. I thought she was just lying. I was trying to test her to prove that she's lying about her allergies. What did you say? You tried to test my wife's allergies. What is wrong with you, Mom? Why on earth would you do something like that? Brian charged his mother directly. I could tell that he was fuming and super angry at the fact that his mother had knowingly tried to give me food with shellfish. My husband was super mad at her, and even Harper understood that. She looked down at her feet and said, I made a mistake. I really thought that she was faking it. Fine, I'm sorry. Am I supposed to give you brownie points for being sorry? This doesn't change a thing, Mom. You still did something horrible that could have gotten my wife killed. You should be more angry at her because she made your sister drink it. I never knew that the soup had shellfish, Harper. You didn't tell me. I smelled something funny, so I was a little hesitant to drink it. Then your daughter came in and wanted to have what you gave me. Why did you give it to her when it was clearly meant for you? She claimed that the soup was for her, and I stole it because it looked delicious. She thought it was her portion because you didn't have any more left for her. Riley asked for it, and I gave it to her. No, you must have done it on purpose. You put my poor daughter in the hospital. I will never forgive you, Alora. Brian, you need to throw her out of the house. She cannot stay with us anymore. Harper was clearly delusional. She had also clearly underestimated how angry Brian was at her. No matter how much she tried to shift the blame onto me, Brian knew that it was his mother who was wrong. What happened to Riley was also her fault since she was the one who cooked it. When Harper angrily said that Brian should throw me out of the house, my husband roared at her and said, "No, I am not going to do that. What I will do is throw you out of the house." What? Why, Brian? You tried to poison my wife by knowingly giving her food with shellfish, Mom. If Riley hadn't demanded to have the food for herself, my wife would be in that hospital bed now. Or maybe I could have proven that she was lying to us all. I can't believe you would still hop on about this, Mom. What is wrong with you? I'm done with you. You will apologize to my wife right now for what you did. No, absolutely not. I only had good intentions, but she is the one who intentionally sent my daughter to the hospital. You are the only one responsible for what happened to your daughter, Harper. Don't try to avoid the blame and make me the bad guy. She's right, Mom. You are the only one to blame for what happened with Riley. As for your real intention, well, you will pay for that too. I meant what I said, Mom. You need to find somewhere else because I will not house you anymore. My mother-in-law started to cry when Brian told her that she needed to leave. Harper begged my husband to forgive her and said that she would never try to do this again. When he made it clear that she wasn't being forgiven, she started to yell at me and said that this was all my plan to make Brian throw her out of the house. She started to make a scene at the hospital and even accused me of poisoning my husband against her. Things got so heated that she was removed from the hospital and told to come back only when she was stable. My husband and I stayed at the hospital till Riley's husband came to see her. She was doing fine and was released that very day. I don't know what happened between her and my mother-in-law, but it looks like they are talking. From what we know, Riley's husband was angry at Harper after hearing what had happened. It looks like he is blaming Harper for everything, and so is Riley. We didn't bother to find out more because we were tired of this drama. Harper came home from the hospital and started to make a scene again. She cried and said that she had nowhere to go. Brian said that he didn't care and he wanted her out by the next day. Harper left my home the next day, but I don't know where she went. She just started to pack and left the house by the afternoon. She did cry and beg for forgiveness from us before she left, but I wasn't going to have someone like her in my house anymore. If my husband hadn't taken the initiative to kick her out, I would have done it all by myself. If he had refused to throw Harper out, I would have left the house. There was no way I was going to live with a woman who tried to get me killed. Thankfully, my husband is a reasonable man and immediately took my side when she accepted that she was trying to test me while risking getting me killed. So my mother-in-law left the house, and Riley too stopped showing up. To my surprise, she texted me to thank me for acting fast and taking her to the hospital. She didn't mention the soup, and neither did I. I was content not discussing this with her and just leaving it behind us. Anyway, Harper is somewhere that I didn't even bother to ask. My husband is not speaking to her, so he doesn't know anything either. I do know that she's not with Riley because her husband didn't allow her to come stay with him. I guess he's mad that her actions almost killed his wife and it gave him an unnecessary hospital bill. I don't really care because overall neither he nor his wife are good people anyway. I'm just glad to have my house to myself, and there is no one to criticize me for having more than one allergy. As the Wilson family's second daughter, I had to live in Jessica's shadow growing up. Our parents said she was flawless in every aspect, and she was 5 years older. I was taught this lesson at a young age, and it was repeated every day in both significant and minor ways. I was thrilled to show my parents that I had gotten an A on my arithmetic test when I was 6 years old. They were admiring Jessica's new dancing move as they were in the kitchen. Mother remarked, "That's nice, honey," without even glancing at my paper. But look at your sister's pirouette. I silently made my way to my room after standing there with my test till the paper became limp in my palms. The pattern remained constant. I got her hand-me-downs, while Jessica got new things from the mall. They got her the newest iPhone when she requested a phone at the age of 12. I was told to be thankful when I received Jessica's old flip phone on my 12th birthday. Dad used to say, "Your sister is going places," if I ventured to voice my displeasure. She needs these things for her future. My future didn't seem to require much investment. The same material was used to make our paternal grandparents, who had a swimming pool and a well-kept lawn in a posh area of town. Grandma Margaret always greeted Jessica with big hugs and enthusiastic squeals when we came, while I received a distracted pat on the head. She would exclaim, "Oh, Sarah," as if she had just realized I was there. You've grown. However, Christmas when I was 8 years old truly made the point. Jessica opened a brand new laptop that she needed for her coursework. I received several pencils and a bag of notebooks. "We're being practical," Grandpa Richard said, grinning patronizingly. "This is more your speed, isn't it?" However, my mother's parents' home served as my own haven. On the opposite side of town, Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George occupied a little ranch-style house. Something extraordinary occurred there. I was given the respect I deserved. When I spoke, they would genuinely pay attention. They put my artwork next to Jessica's on their refrigerator. When I visited, they prepared my favorite dishes because they remembered them. Jessica detested going there. She would gripe, "It's so boring. They don't even have a pool." And Grandma Eleanor never lets me choose what we watch on TV. She thus stopped coming, so I had them all to myself. I spent my afternoons with Eleanor and George's while our parents were busy escorting Jessica to her never-ending schedule of events: ballet 1 month, horseback riding the next, and violin lessons she would stop after 3 weeks. They helped me with my homework, showed me how to bake cookies, and never once made comparisons between me and my sister. My parents made the ultimate decision on my value to the family when I was 10 years old. In what they referred to as a family meeting, the sentencing was set long before the trial even started, yet it seemed more like a trial. It was an October Sunday afternoon. The 6 of us sat down in our living room, Jessica and I sitting on chairs we had brought in from the dining room, both sets of grandparents on the matching sofas, and Mom and Dad standing by the fireplace. The air was thick with artificial significance. Dad started off by saying we need to discuss something serious, with his hands clenched behind his back like a CEO announcing layoffs. As you know, college education isn't getting any cheaper. I saw Jessica sit up straight in her chair and brush her flawless blonde hair. She was already rehearsing her future college student posture at the age of 15. I already knew where this was headed, so I sat still with my hands folded in my lap. Mom went on, looking at Jessica. "We've been saving since the girls were born. But with the current economy, well, we can only afford to send one of them to college." The subsequent delay was only for theatrical effect, similar to how TV shows create tension before revealing the clear winner, and it wasn't actually a pause at all. "Jessica will be starting college in 3 years," Dad declared. "She has demonstrated exceptional talent in a wide range of fields. We must encourage her to reach her full potential." He then turned to face me, his face displaying a mixture of contempt and phony pity. "Sarah, you're unique, my dear. You are more equipped for hands-on work. College isn't actually necessary for you." Dad's mother, Grandma Margaret, gave a hearty nod. The woman said, "Jessica is so gifted. She possessed natural elegance, according to her dancing instructor only last week. She must have the greatest education available." As I sat there, I felt less and less like Jessica, not gifted enough, not valuable enough to invest in. Now the well-known statement has just been formally sealed and stamped. But then something unexpected happened. Grandpa George stood up, his face red with anger. "This is absolutely unfair," he declared. "How dare you write off a 10-year-old child like this?" George, my father, started, but Grandma Eleanor cut him off. "If you won't support both your daughters equally," she said, her voice sharp as ice, "then we'll pay for Sarah's college ourselves." I watched as my maternal grandparents stood up together, a united front. "Sarah will have her chance at college, Grandma Eleanor announced. "We'll make sure of that." Then they walked out, leaving a stunned silence behind. Later that night, I was heading to the kitchen for water when I heard my parents talking in their bedroom. The heating vent carried their words clearly up to the hallway. "Mother's being ridiculous," Mom was saying. "Sarah's not college material. She can barely keep up in regular classes. They should give us that money for Jessica's education instead. It would be wasted on Sarah. She's just not bright enough." "I don't know why they're pushing this," Dad agreed. I stood there in the dark hallway, their words washing over me like a familiar bit of rain. But somehow, it didn't hurt as much as it should have. Maybe because I'd heard it all before, or maybe because I could still hear Grandma Eleanor's fierce promise echoing in my head. The years passed, and Jessica went off to an expensive private college while I finished high school. My parents never missed a chance to brag about their perfect daughter, constantly updating everyone about Jessica's amazing college experience, her excellent grades, and her bright future ahead. I focused on my own studies, spending most of my time at Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George's house. Their quiet support meant more than all my parents' loud praise of Jessica ever could. Then came the day that shattered my parents' perfect vision of their golden child. I was in my senior year when Jessica came home from college, fresh from graduation. I was doing homework at the kitchen table when she burst through the front door, mascara running down her face. "Mom, Dad," she sobbed. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom dropped her coffee mug, dark liquid spreading across the kitchen floor. "Who's the father?" Dad finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. Jessica's next words sent Mom collapsing into a chair. "I don't know for sure." I watched my parents' faces as their perfect world crumbled, but it took them less than 5 minutes to reconstruct it. "Oh, sweetie," Mom rushed to hug Jessica. "It's not your fault. These things happen." "We'll help you raise the baby," Dad added quickly. "You can stay here with us." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you serious?" I said from my spot at the table. "She parties her way through college, gets pregnant, doesn't even know who the father is, and you're still making excuses for her." "Sarah," Mom snapped. "No, listen," I continued, years of frustration finally boiling over. "This is what happens when you spoil someone their entire life, when you never make them face consequences." "How dare you?" Dad thundered. "Your sister is going through a difficult time, and you're being cruel." Jessica burst into fresh tears, and Mom wrapped her arms around her protectively. "Get out," she screamed at me. "You heartless little." I didn't wait to hear the rest. I ran upstairs, threw some clothes into a bag, and walked out. Behind me, I could hear them consoling Jessica, telling her everything would be okay, that none of this was her fault. Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George took me in without question. I finished my senior year living with them, focusing on my college applications. My parents didn't call, didn't check on me, didn't even show up at my graduation. But I had my real family there, my grandparents, beaming with pride. As I accepted my diploma that fall, I left for college in another city, my tuition paid by my grandparents, just as they'd promised years ago. I heard through the grapevine that Jessica had given birth to a daughter and was living with our parents. They were probably still making excuses for her, still treating her like their perfect child who could do no wrong. Life had a funny way of working out. While Jessica's brilliant future had crumbled, I was thriving. After graduating college with honors, I landed a job at a top consulting firm in the city. Within 6 years, I had worked my way up to senior consultant, earned respect from my colleagues, and even managed to buy my own apartment. My routine was comfortable. Challenging work during the week, weekend brunches with friends, and regular video calls with Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George. They were proud of everything I'd accomplished, and that was all the family validation I needed. Then, on a regular Tuesday morning, my phone rang. I almost dropped my coffee when I saw Mom flash across the screen, a number I hadn't seen in almost a decade. Sarah, her voice sounded older, tired. "We need your help." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in my office, still trying to process what she'd told me. Jessica had run away again, this time with some guy she'd met at a bar. She'd left behind her 9-year-old daughter, the niece I'd never met. "Please come home," Mom had pleaded. "We need to discuss this in person." That's how I found myself driving back to my childhood home that evening. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling around the windows. Mom and Dad had aged more than I expected. Dad's hair completely gray now, Mom's face lined with worry. They led me to the living room, the same room where they'd once declared I wasn't worth sending to college. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Jessica's been unstable," Dad began, staring at his hands. "She never kept a job for more than a few months. Different men, different apartments. She always ended up back here." Mom wiped her eyes. "We tried to help, paid her debts, watched Lucy while she worked, or said she was working. But last week she met this man, said he was taking her to California to become an actress." She laughed bitterly. "She packed a bag and left. Didn't even say goodbye to Lucy." "We're drowning in debt," Dad admitted, his voice cracking. "Credit cards, personal loans, all to keep Jessica afloat." And now I waited for the rest, watching them squirm uncomfortably on the couch that had faded from cream to dingy beige. "We want you to take Lucy," Mom finally said. "Adopt her, actually. You're stable, successful. You could give her a good life. We're too old for this. We can't start over with a child." I sat there, stunned. These people, who had written me off as worthless, who hadn't even come to my graduation, were now asking me to take responsibility for a child I'd never met. A child they'd helped raise for 9 years while enabling Jessica's chaos. After my parents went to bed that night, I sat in the kitchen with Lucy. She was nothing like I expected, nothing like Jessica. While my sister had been loud and demanding, Lucy was quiet and thoughtful, with serious brown eyes and a gentle smile. "Do you like to read?" I asked, noticing a worn copy of Harry Potter on the kitchen counter. "I love it," she said softly, "but Grandma says I read too much. She says I should do something useful instead." Over cups of hot chocolate, Lucy slowly opened up. She told me about her life with my parents, how Grandma sighed heavily whenever she had to make Lucy dinner, how Grandpa complained about the cost of her school supplies. They didn't hit her or starve her, but their resentment was palpable in every interaction. I spent the next week taking time off work, getting to know my niece. We went for ice cream, visited the local library, and talked about everything and nothing. Lucy was smart, kind, and remarkably resilient despite everything she'd been through. She showed me her Strata report cards that no one had ever celebrated, her artwork that never made it to the fridge. The decision to adopt her wasn't easy. I had a career, a life I'd built carefully from scratch. But watching Lucy try to make herself smaller, quieter, less troublesome, just as I had at her age, made the choice clear. The legal process was exhausting. For months, I gathered documentation, my financial records, character references, proof of stable employment. Jessica didn't contest the termination of her parental rights, didn't even show up for the hearing. Finally, after what felt like endless paperwork and interviews, I became Lucy's legal guardian. The day we packed up her room at my parents' house, they barely looked up from their TV show. "Don't forget to forward her school records," was all Mom said. Lucy flourished in our new life together. She decorated her room in our apartment with fairy lights and bookshelves, joined the school's debate team, made friends who came over for movie nights and study sessions. We developed our own little rituals: Sunday morning pancakes, evening walks in the park, marathon sessions of board games. Monthly visits to Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George became a highlight for both of us. They doted on Lucy the way loving grandparents should, proudly displaying her artwork and report cards, remembering her favorite foods, listening to her stories with genuine interest. 5 years passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. Lucy turned 14, growing into a confident, compassionate teenager who consistently made the honor roll. My parents never called to check on her, never sent birthday cards, never asked how she was doing. But Lucy didn't seem to mind. She had found her real family. The phone call from my parents came on a Saturday morning. "We'd like you and Lucy to come visit," Mom said, her voice suspiciously cheerful. "We miss her." After 5 years of silence, their sudden interest set off alarm bells. But I decided to go. Lucy deserved to make her own choices about family relationships, and I didn't want to be the one standing in her way. The moment we walked through their front door, I understood why they'd called. Jessica was there, sitting on the couch like she'd never left. "Lucy," she cried, jumping up and rushing toward my niece. "Oh, baby, I've missed you so much." I watched Lucy's face carefully. She stood frozen, emotions flickering across her features: hope, fear, confusion, longing. Jessica wrapped her in a tearful embrace, while our parents looked on approvingly. "I've changed," Jessica announced, wiping her eyes. "I've realized what's important. I want my daughter back." The word "back" hit me like a slap, like Lucy was a borrowed sweater she'd finally decided to reclaim. "I'm living in Phoenix now," Jessica continued, "with Robert. He's got a great job, and we have a beautiful house. Lucy would love it there." "Do you have a job?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Jessica's smile faltered. "Well, not right now, but Robert makes enough for all of us." "And what happens if things don't work out with Robert?" I pressed. "What's your backup plan?" "Why are you being so negative?" Mom snapped. "Your sister is trying to do the right thing." "The right thing?" I laughed incredulously. The right thing would have been not abandoning her daughter for 5 years. The right thing would have been sending birthday cards, making phone calls, showing any interest at all in Lucy's life. "I made mistakes," Jessica wailed, "but she's my daughter." "Stop being selfish, Sarah," Dad cut in. "You've done your part, but Lucy needs her real mother now. You can have your own children if you want to play mommy so badly." I stared at them, stunned by their cruelty. These people who had failed not 1 but 2 daughters. They had enabled Jessica's irresponsibility for decades and had never once, in 5 years, asked how Lucy was doing in school or what her interests were. Now they thought they could just restart the cycle of dysfunction. "Lucy isn't a toy you can pass around," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "She's a person who needs stability and real love, not empty promises." Where were you when she had nightmares, when she was sick, when she won the school spelling bee? Where were any of you? "You have no right," Jessica screamed. "She's my child." "A child you abandoned," I shot back. "A child you left with people who resented her existence. A child who deserved better than all of you." Lucy, who had been silent throughout this exchange, suddenly grabbed my hand. "We're leaving," I announced, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "And don't you dare try to contact us." Jessica's call came exactly a week after our confrontation. When I saw her number, I almost didn't answer, but something told me to record the conversation, a habit I developed after years of dealing with difficult clients. "Hey, sis," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. I've been thinking about our situation, and I think I have a solution that could work for everyone. What situation? Lucy, of course. Look, I know you've gotten attached to her, and I know you make good money at your fancy job. So here's the deal. Give me $150,000, and I won't sue for custody. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. Excuse me. It's really a win-win, Jessica continued casually, as if she weren't trying to sell her own child. You get to keep Lucy, and I get enough money to start fresh. You can afford it with your salary. Let me get this straight, I said, my voice shaking. You're trying to sell your daughter to me? Don't be so dramatic. I'm just being practical. You want Lucy. I need money. Simple business transaction. She's your child, Jessica, not a used car. Fine, she snapped, her sweet tone vanishing. Have it your way. I'll sue for custody, and you'll never see her again. How's that for practical? She hung up and I sat there, clutching my phone, feeling sick to my stomach. The lawsuit came 3 days later. Jessica's new boyfriend had hired her a slick lawyer who specialized in family court. The initial filing painted Jessica as a reformed mother who had overcome hardship to create a stable home for her daughter, while portraying me as a manipulative aunt who had taken advantage of a temporary situation. In court, Jessica played her role perfectly. Tears streaming down her face, she told the judge about her journey of personal growth and how she'd found stability with her new partner. She claimed I had alienated Lucy from her, that I was using her daughter to prove I was better than my sister. On her behalf, our parents testified that they had only requested me to babysit Lucy for a short time while Jessica recovered. Dad even implied that I was trying to turn Lucy against her mother by influencing her emotionally. I was ready when I sat there and listened to their falsehoods while they spun their web of deceit. Your Honor, my attorney said, I'd like to submit an audio recording into evidence. As Jessica's words filled the courtroom, her face became pale. I won't file a custody lawsuit if you give me $150,000. I need money. You want Lucy. Straightforward commercial deal. The ensuing hush was deafening. Jessica's attorney stumbled and attempted to protest, but the harm was already done. For the first time, our parents remained still in their chairs, making no excuses to accommodate their ideal daughter. Then Lucy got to her feet. She appeared older and more self-assured than I had ever seen her at 14. Her words, "I want to stay with Sarah," were rather explicit. My mom left me behind. I was picked by Sarah. My actual family is her. I saw Jessica's face fall apart, not because of true sorrow, but rather because she realized she had no more power. Our parents were unable to look at each other, and Lucy, rose to her feet, at last unburdened by her mother's shadow. The judge made a prompt and clear ruling. I was granted complete custody of Lucy, and Jessica was prohibited from communicating with her daughter at all. Her effort to sell custody was deemed morally reprehensible by the court, who also said it was an obvious sign that she was unable to be a parent. As the decision was read, I saw Jessica sob in her chair. Without saying a word, her boyfriend, who had been seated in the rear of the courtroom, got up and left. I then learned that he had left her that same day because he was repulsed by her effort to sell her own child. In the courtroom parking lot, my parents attempted to apprehend us. "Sarah, please," demanded Mom. "We can work this out as a family." I gave them one final glance. "Relatives, neither of us has considered you family in years. What you did to me and what you let Jessica to do to Lucy is not fair." Dad insisted, "But where will Jessica go?" Robert abandoned her. There was no comedy in my laughter. Obviously, I'm still concerned about Jessica. There are certain things that never change. Jessica returned to her original residence with our parents. The golden child is still being pampered, forgiven, and not maturing. This time, however, she had lost something priceless as a result of her mistakes. Life continued. As though the burden of doubt had finally been removed, Lucy flung herself back into her studies with newfound vigor. She began taking photography classes, joined the school newspaper team, and expressed interest in pursuing a college degree in journalism. As we were preparing supper one evening, she asked, "You know what's funny?" Because my mother kept departing, I believed for years that I was flawed. However, I now see that she was the issue. She was only capable of loving herself. In awe of her knowledge, I gave her a firm hug. "You're the strongest person I know, kiddo." Grandpa George and Grandma Eleanor continued to be our pillars of support. At their home, Sundays became a revered custom. They preserved newspaper clippings of every item Lucy wrote for the school paper, boasted to their friends about her accomplishments, and proudly hung her photographs in their living room. Grandma Eleanor once told me, "You two saved each other," as we watched Lucy teach Grandpa George how to operate his new digital camera. "Just like George and I tried to save you." She was correct. I had discovered the family I had always desired, not the one I was born into, but the one we chose together, while attempting to give Lucy the upbringing I was never able to have. I still sometimes receive texts from my parents about Jessica's most recent drama, but I choose to ignore them. Lucy said she prefers it that way and hasn't spoken to her mother since the court battle. After burning, certain bridges ought to remain ashes. Lucy took first place in a student journalism competition held around the state last week. I reflected on the fearful 9-year-old child I had met years before and the self-assured adolescent she had grown into as I watched her get her prize. I reflected on broken cycles, healed wounds, and unrestricted love.
"Hey, where are you? What are you doing? My mom is in trouble." The voice on the answering machine message came from my husband. My mother-in-law had collapsed and had to be rushed to the hospital by ambulance. When I opened the wardrobe in my mother-in-law's room to prepare for her hospitalization, I saw an unbelievable picture of my husband and sister-in-law. When I saw the picture, my mind went blank, and I ran to my parents' house to escape. It had been 3 years since I met my husband. I had been deceived for a long time. My husband did not love me. He just wanted a wife. I could never forgive him, so I decided to divorce him. My name is Sarah. I'm 32 years old, and I work at a beauty salon. 4 years ago, I was in a hurry. My friends and colleagues from school were getting married one after another. I wanted to get married while I was still in my 20s. I was tired of hearing about husbands and children from my friends who were married. My friends may not have meant to belittle me, but although I listened to them smiling, there were times I cried on the way home. I was so envious. I had had a boyfriend for a while, and I wondered if I would ever get married. Such thoughts made me feel gloomy and impatient. I had 2 years left in my 20s, so I decided to start marriage activity with all my heart. I think I did most of what I could, such as dating apps and marriage activity parties. I met a lot of people, but it was difficult to meet the right person. The person I liked was not marriage-minded and never got to the point of a relationship. I don't think I have high ideals, but it didn't work out. I've only ever had friendships and then relationships. I was struggling with the difficulties of marriage activity. In the meantime, my friends were getting married one after another, so I decided to register with the marriage agency. It was expensive, but I thought there would only be people I really wanted to marry there. That's when I met my husband, Ken. He was 5 years older than me and a refreshingly handsome man working for a prestigious company. It was a wonder that he wasn't married, and from the moment I saw his profile, I knew he was the only man for me. I signed up because I wanted to get married as soon as possible. That's what my husband said on the day we first met. "Me too. Nice to meet you," he said. I thought he was a refreshing person, just like his profile, polite and nice in the way he talked to me. I appealed to him like never before. I told him that I didn't have much education or work experience, but that I liked doing housework. "I'm too busy with my work to take care of the house, so I want to marry someone like Sarah," he said with a smile. I was flattered and so happy. Finally, I actually lived alone with my mother. She has a chronic disease, so I can't leave her alone. If we were to get married, I think I would ask her to live with me. "I hope you'll consider that as well," he explained politely. I was a little surprised, but I felt that he was sincere in telling me in advance rather than suddenly telling me after we got married. In my work, I've often dealt with female customers of all ages, so I'm used to dealing with older women. I'm rather good at it. I didn't know what kind of person my future mother-in-law was, but as long as she would meet me, I thought living with her would not be a problem. More importantly, I wanted to get to know Ken better. He seemed to like me, and we were able to go on a few dates. The more I met him, the more I thought he was a gentleman and a nice person. I was also able to sit in one dinner and meet his mom. His mom was petite and very pretty. "Sarah, you're a lovely lady, and you're too good for Ken. I know you might be nervous about living with me, but you don't have to worry about me. I have a chronic illness, but I don't need nursing care. Next time, let's go out for parfait instead of this nice restaurant," she said. She has a high voice that speaks in a relaxed manner, and we share a love of sweets, so I thought we would hit it off. I no longer felt uneasy about living together. Ken said that he wanted to get married right away, and we started dating on the premise of marriage. Ken was a busy man, constantly working, but he made time for me. We went on trips and spent a lot of time together. Even after seeing his face right after waking up, my impression of him was still the same as it was when I first met him. He was refreshing. The more I saw him, the more I liked him. His mom and I became such good friends that we even went out for sweets together. She takes a lot of medication, but she's full of energy and young. I was worried about her, though, because she has to wait in line at popular restaurants. "Don't worry, I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to taste food so good that I have to wait in line," she said with a big smile on her face. Treating her like a friend, I sometimes forgot about the age difference in their relationship. She told me that her mother-in-law had been divorced twice, and that she had had some difficulties when she was younger. We dated for around 6 months and then got married. I was happy that we were able to get married just barely in our 20s, and from the bottom of my heart, I was glad that I had worked so hard on my marriage activities. We quickly registered our marriage and began preparing to live together. Then one day, my husband told me there was something he needed to talk to me about. I wondered what was going on and had a bit of a bad feeling about it. "I never told you this before, but I have a sister, Hannah, who is not related to me by blood." At first, I didn't quite understand what he meant. Hannah was my husband's stepfather's daughter. My mother-in-law and father-in-law divorced 5 years ago. My father-in-law is dead, and Hannah has no family. My mother-in-law and Hannah don't get along well, so she never comes to my in-laws' house. But my husband says he's worried about my sister-in-law, who has no family, and keeps in touch with her. I'd like to invite her to the wedding, but my mom hates her and is against it. But she means a lot to me, and I want to introduce her to you at least once, he said. I was worried about what kind of a person my mother-in-law, who was so kind to me, would hate, but I could see how much my husband cared about his family, so I decided to meet her. Nice to meet you, Sarah. I'm Hannah. She was a very beautiful and flamboyant-looking person. She said she worked at a bar. I couldn't believe that my mother-in-law disliked her. She was not at all unpleasant and cheerfully made the occasion more enjoyable. When Ken was in middle school and I was in high school, we started living together. Isn't it like a comic book that we suddenly became a family? Hannah said. What do you mean, like in a comic book? I asked, a nervous teenager. Hannah told me stories about the days she lived with Ken, and Ken would make fast-paced quips about her stories. Perhaps because they were so beautiful, they seemed like a perfect couple. I could tell that she was very dear to my husband. Sarah, I'm sorry I couldn't make it to your wedding. Be a good wife, Hannah said to me as we parted. Don't tell my mother about today. If she gets angry, it will be a pain in the butt, Ken said on the way home. I don't know what kind of conflict there is between my mother-in-law and Hannah, but I don't think it's any of my business. I decided not to tell anyone about my meeting with Hannah and kept it to myself. And so life began for the three of us. Ken was still busy with work and came home late every day. Sometimes when he had a day off, he would go out with my mother-in-law and I, just the three of us. I was also working, so I did the housework in cooperation with my mother-in-law. Sometimes we went out to eat sweets or see a movie together. By all accounts, we were a happy family. I was a little worried about my mother-in-law because sometimes when she wasn't feeling well, she would sleep all day. I tried to keep in touch with her frequently while I was at work. The only thing that bothered me when we started living together was that Ken was always looking at his phone. He was almost always on his phone doing something, except when he came home and was eating. He seemed to bring his phone into the bath as well. At first, I didn't mind because I thought maybe he was addicted to playing games, but it was so much that I began to worry about it. One time, he called me to say he was heading out. I called him back because I wanted him to get me something at the convenience store, but his phone was engaged the whole time. I couldn't get through to him on the phone. When he came back, I said, Ken, I've been calling you all day. Sorry, I got a call from the company, he said. We had just gotten married, and I didn't think it was possible that he was cheating on me, but I couldn't help but be curious. My mother-in-law didn't seem to be bothered by it, as if it was a normal occurrence. One day, I felt bad, but glanced at the screen of his phone and saw that he was texting someone. It seemed that they talked often. One night, Ken came home late, and I wondered who he was talking to in the middle of the night. Hey, who do you always talk with in the middle of the night? I asked, pretending to be silly after my mother-in-law went to bed. It's my sister. Did you suspect me of cheating on you? Don't worry, he laughed. I laughed along with him and thought I had lost it by worrying too much. From then on, I didn't care how much he was on his phone, but he was always busy with work and didn't have much time to spend with me. I was a little uncomfortable with him spending nearly all his free time with Hannah. 2 years later, life with the three of us was going well. My mother-in-law and I would always visit the sweet store whenever it opened. Today's pancakes might be the best pancakes of all time. I was thinking the same thing. I can't wait to try them with you. If a stranger saw us, they wouldn't think we were mother and daughter. I never once felt self-conscious about the fact that we lived together, and I love my mother-in-law. Ken was still busy with work and came home late. He was on his phone all the time. I was used to it by now, and I didn't say anything. I'm not asking him to do the housework, but I did accumulate small complaints that if he had time to contact Hannah, he could at least put the socks he took off in the laundry. However, when Ken had time off, we made time for our family, and he never forgot to celebrate our wedding anniversary or my birthday. Although there were small complaints, we were still a happy family. Then one day, my mother-in-law was sick and spent the day in bed. I was worried and went to check on her several times. She seemed to sleep quietly during the day, but in the evening she complained, "Sarah, I'm in pain." She was breathing hard. I called an ambulance in a hurry. The ambulance arrived immediately, and I rode in it to the hospital. I was relieved when I found out that she wasn't in critical condition. I called Ken to let him know that she was going to be hospitalized for a while. He left work early to go to the hospital, and I decided to go home and pack to stay with my mother-in-law in the hospital for a few days. Upon returning home, I opened the wardrobe in my mother-in-law's room to prepare her insurance card and personal seal. My mother-in-law said they were in the top drawer, but I couldn't find them, so I opened the bottom drawer. Then I found a small box in there. I opened the box, thinking it might contain an insurance card, and found a large number of photographs in it. I was so shocked when I saw them that I went to the bathroom and threw up. There were pictures of Ken and Hannah in it. It wasn't a picture of them as brother and sister. It was a picture of them as lovers. They were holding hands and kissing each other, and I felt sick just looking at a few of the pictures. So I closed the box. It was painful to think about the fact that he had been in close contact with Hannah up until this point. My mind went blank, and the next thing I knew, I was running to my parents' house with that box in my arms. At my parents' house was my mother, who was surprised to see me. When my mother saw what was in the box, she hugged me. After crying for a while, she saw that I had calmed down. "These pictures of Ken and another woman, is he cheating?" she asked me. My mother was surprised when I told her that it was Hannah and that the box was in the wardrobe in my mother-in-law's room. I hadn't even told my mother that I had a sister-in-law. "I can't live with him anymore," I said to my mother. She said, "Of course you can't live with him. I can't allow it." My mother was also angry. When I looked at my phone, I found a lot of incoming calls from Ken and a voicemail message that said, "Hey, where are you? What are you doing when your mother is in trouble?" The message was an angry one. I thought, I'm the one who should be angry. I turned off my phone that day because talking about it would remind me of the pictures and make me sick. The next day, out of the goodness of my heart, I contacted him. "There's something I need to talk to you about this evening. I'll be there with my mother, so please call Hannah," I told him. "Thank goodness she's alive. I wonder what you were going to say when my mother was in trouble." He started blabbing on and on. "Please do. I'll see you at night." I hung up the phone. As soon as I hung up the phone, I went to my mother-in-law's hospital room. My mother-in-law looked at me happily and called my name. "I'm sorry you're not feeling well, mother-in-law, but I wanted to hear the truth." I opened the box I found in my mother-in-law's wardrobe and showed it to her. Then my mother-in-law began to shed tears. "Sarah, I am so sorry. Ken's stepdaughter of my ex-husband, and 5 years ago she told me that they were lovers. Even though they're not related, they're both my children. I told them I couldn't allow that to happen. Hannah got angry and left the house, and I never saw her again. I should have told you, but they're old photos. Don't worry. I don't even know what Hannah is doing now, and I'm sure she's not in contact with Ken," she said. My mother-in-law had straight eyes and didn't look like she was lying. Ken is still in contact with Hannah. In fact, he introduced me to her once years ago. When I said this, my mother-in-law shed another large tear. "But you're already married. I'm sorry. You did nothing wrong, but I can't be a family with Ken anymore. I'm going to divorce him." "Don't apologize to me. It's my fault for not noticing. I'm sorry, my mother-in-law said. I couldn't stop crying either. I left the hospital room and went to the house where my mother, Ken, and Hannah were waiting. When I arrived, they were all waiting for me. I sat down and immediately showed them the pictures. You two are lovers, and I'm divorcing you. Ken didn't seem offended and said, "Oh, yes, that's right. Me as a family member and me as a lover are two different things. We were happy as a family, weren't we? Mom was happy too. What's wrong with that? We don't have to get divorced," he said with his usual fresh smile. Hannah added, "I'm sorry I didn't tell you, but I have no intention of destroying your family. I don't think divorce is necessary." I was trembling with anger as I listened to what they were saying. "Don't be silly. This is cheating. How can I be family with someone like that?" I yelled at them in a loud voice. "Well, don't be so loud. If you want a divorce, that's fine. I've done my duty as a family member. Since you're the one who initiated it, it's an amicable divorce," Ken said, something I didn't understand. What? What's amicable about this? This is a huge betrayal. I'm going to charge both of you alimony. "Oh, okay, that's fine. I'll pay as much money as you want. In return, don't tell my mother." As for the reason for the divorce, let's just call it a personality conflict. "I've already told your mother everything." She was crying. I told her we're getting a divorce. "What? Why would you do that?" Hearing my words, he lost his composure and shouted loudly. Hannah, too. "Why did you tell her?" she cried. "My lawyer will contact you about the alimony, so goodbye." With that, I left the house with my mother. My mother said, "You did a great job." She hugged me, and I cried loudly into her chest. Now I know that Ken didn't care about me from the beginning. He just wanted a wife to reassure his mother. I wanted to marry him too, and maybe we were happy as a family, but I can't forgive myself for not knowing that I had been betrayed ever since we met. I'm glad that I realized it now and was able to get a divorce. Later, through my lawyer, the divorce was successfully finalized. I requested alimony from Ken and Hannah, but Hannah didn't have any money and was angry at Ken for only paying his share of the alimony. Their relationship soon deteriorated, and they decided to separate. Since she couldn't afford to pay the alimony, Hannah started working lunch and dinner shifts at the bar where she originally worked. After she was discharged from the hospital, my mother-in-law was angry with Ken and told him that if he sees Hannah even once in the future, she'll cut ties with him. My mother-in-law and I still keep in touch, and we occasionally go out for sweets. I'm relieved that she is out of the hospital and seems to be in good health. I now live with my parents. I'm busy preparing for the reopening at the beauty salon where I used to work. When things settle down a bit more, I'll start living alone again. I'm no longer envious when I hear about my friends who are married. Until the day comes when I meet someone wonderful again, I'll keep working hard.
Hi, I'm Marie. Mom and wife full-time, that's me. Paul, that's my husband, works a trading gig, and let's just say he's married to his job just as much as he is to me. Used to scribble down thoughts on books, reading between and beyond the lines, but these days I'm more about reading bedtime stories to our boy, Jack. Life threw some curveballs early on, lost my parents when I still needed them. That was rough. Then along came Paul, with a family in tow. His folks were the real deal, good people, you know. Took me in, no questions. Made me feel like I finally belonged somewhere again. Been with Paul for years now, since those college days when love seemed to be enough to fill any void. We settled into a rhythm, he at work and me taking care of everything else. But man, did that rhythm skip and stumble when Jack came into the picture. Paul changed, or maybe this was always him, just waiting for a reason to surface. He'd come home on a Friday night with a few too many drinks in him, loose-lipped and surly. "You gotta start shedding that weight, Marie," he'd snipe after slipping off his tie. "You barely fit in those jeans anymore." I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt, but I told myself to brush it off, toughen up, maybe he'd cool down by morning. But mornings just brought hangovers and silence until the next round. The house became this place where I tiptoed, trying not to set Paul off. Jack, little trooper, he could feel it too, sticking close, watching his old man with wide, careful eyes. One particularly rough Friday, Paul came home and made a beeline for the fridge, crack open a cold one. I was on the floor with Jack, blocks scattered around. "Another day in paradise, huh?" Paul sneered, leaning against the counter. I forced a smile. Just the usual, you know, chasing after this little tornado. I ruffled Jack's hair, but my heart wasn't in it. Paul tossed his head back, downing half the bottle. "Maybe put some of that energy into a workout routine, eh?" I bit my tongue, counting to 10 in my head. "I'll look into it," was all I managed, shuffling Jack into his pile of toys, anything to escape the cutting edge in Paul's tone. But the weight wasn't just on my hips, it was on my chest, heavy, making it hard to breathe. I didn't know who I was in Paul's eyes anymore. I had finally shaken off those last stubborn pounds. It felt good, kind of. But Paul, well, he had a talent for finding flaws. My sweats and baggy tees were the new target. "Jesus, Marie, you dress like you're living at the gym. When was the last time you dressed up? Remember how you used to look?" There he was, leaning on the doorframe with that look that said everything his words didn't. I glanced down at my stretched-out mom life tee and yoga pants. "This is just practical, Paul. You want me all dolled up to do laundry and wrangle our son?" One corner of his mouth curled up like he had just made a successful trade. "I dunno, how about looking good for your husband? That used to matter." I sighed, rolling my eyes. "Well, unless my husband starts taking meetings at the playground or the grocery store, I think I'll stick with practical." He shook his head, chuckling without humor. "You used to care, Marie." His voice trailed off as he wandered back toward the living room, his disapproval hanging in the air like a bad smell. Then there was Jack, our boy, trying to navigate the shaky terrain between us. I was teaching him please and thank you, thinking manners mattered. Paul caught a bit of our lesson one afternoon and scoffed. "Look at you, teaching him to be Mr. Manners. You want him to get trampled on?" "Manners are important, Paul. It's about respect," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Respect is earned, not politeness policed," he shot back. "He needs to toughen up, not be some yes, please pushover." Then the whole freeloader thing started. One night, Paul came home, tie askew, looking like he had won and lost the same fight. "Nice day?" he asked, sarcasm heavy as he glanced around what I'd come to see as our minefield of a home. I put down Jack's toy and braced for what was coming. Just the same, dealing with tantrums and spills. How was work? Paul's laugh was short and sharp. Work? Oh, it was just dandy, supporting a parasite. My cheeks burned. Excuse me? My voice was a little too loud. Jack's eyes flitted from me to Paul, sensing the shift. A parasite, Marie. I work, you play house, he said, each word pointed and heavy. That's the thanks I get? I am raising our child, Paul. Your child. That's work. That's vital, I said, my voice rising now, too. Jack started fussing then, picking up on the tension. I swept him up into my arms, trying to shield him from the fallout. Paul had a knack for knowing when he'd pushed too far, and his next words were more measured. Marie, I go out there and deal with sharks all day. Come home, and what? I don't know, something different. I can't be your one-man show, Paul, I said softly, trying to defuse the bomb that our marriage had become. I'm here, juggling a million things for us, for Jack. We looked at each other then, really looked, and I wondered if he saw the plea in my eyes. The help me, back me up, be with me that I felt screaming inside. But he turned away, the finality of his silence telling me that no, he didn't see. He didn't want to. One day, the disrespect boiled over. Jack scrunched up his little face and called me a name, a real zinger. He got it from Paul. You're just a lazy bum, he had hurled at me, his tiny voice bitter and angry. I felt like I'd been slapped. What? Jack, no, you can't say that, I stumbled, shocked. He folded his arms, stubborn as his dad. Dad says it, so can I. That was the last straw. When Paul got home, I was waiting, steaming like a forgotten kettle. You know what your son called me today? I laid into him without waiting for an answer. Paul dropped his keys on the counter and chuckled, clearly not seeing the line had been crossed. What did he say? The truth? He tossed his words over his shoulder as he walked to the fridge, his casualness like acid on my skin. Is that funny to you? I was shouting now, my usual restraint snapped tight as a dry twig. Your son is calling me names. Paul leaned against the kitchen counter, beer in hand, a smirk blooming on his face. Oh, come on, Marie. Kid's gotta learn to stand his ground. I was staring at him, hands balled into fists. By disrespecting his mother? He shrugged, a lazy lift of his shoulders that sent me teetering on the edge. You're too soft on him. Look, he's getting some spine. Spine? My voice shot up another octave. He's learning to be just like you. Paul grinned and ruffled Jack's hair. Ain't that right, champ? I turned to Jack, who was looking at us with eyes that were too old for his face. Jack, listen to me. What you said to me this morning was wrong. You can't talk to people like that. Jack's chin jutted out, defiant and stubborn. But Dad. I don't care what Dad says, you listen to your mom. I cut him off, my heart thudding like a drum. I was desperate for him not to follow in Paul's footsteps. But Paul wasn't letting it go. The boy's gotta learn to speak up. World's not gonna hand him anything. You keep coddling him, he'll end up. I get it, all right? I get it. I cut him off, feeling the weight of his words like a physical thing on my chest. But there's a line. You don't get it, do you? Paul threw up his hands, that ugly smirk still there. Whatever, Marie. You make mountains out of molehills. I turned from him, that burning in my chest now a churning mess. This is not how I want our son to grow up. This disrespect ends now, it ends here. Paul just took a swig of his beer, and I knew, right then, my words were just bouncing off him. I looked at Jack, really looked at him. "You apologize to me, now," I said, the power in my voice surprising even me. Jack's eyes darted between me and Paul, but he knew that tone. "Sorry, Mom." The word was small, almost lost in the kitchen, but it was there, and it was a start. I moved closer to Jack, knelt down so I was eye level with him. "Thank you. We treat each other with respect in this house, you got it?" Paul snorted behind me, but I ignored him. Jack nodded, a hint of my boy peeking through that new sullen shadow he wore. It was a crack in the wall Paul was building around him, a crack, but also a starting point. I stood up, squared my shoulders. "We're going to fix this, Jack. No more name-calling, no more disrespect. We're better than that." I took Jack's hand, and we left the room, leaving Paul and his smugness behind us. I stood there on the sidewalk, my phone shaking in my hand. It was one of those moments where your gut ties up in knots. There, across the street, Paul was laughing it up with some woman. Blonde, curvy, and looking at my husband like he was the last piece of chocolate in the box. My thumb pressed record before I even decided to. The walk home felt a million miles long. A part of me hoped it was a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew. Back in our kitchen, I threw my keys on the counter. Paul was sitting there with a beer, like he always did, but today the sight of him made me sick. Without a word, I tossed my phone on the table in front of him, the video playing. "Care to explain?" Paul looked at the screen, his eyes going hard when he saw what was on it. He muted it, placed it calmly on the counter, and then looked straight at me. "Yeah, she's beautiful," he said, his voice dripping venom. "You used to be like that." I felt the slap of his words, my cheeks flaming with anger, my body tense. "So, that's it, huh? You parade around town with some woman while I'm at home?" Paul stood up, his chair scraping back against the tile. He was too close now, his voice low and mean. "What, you stalking me now, Marie? Can't handle the fact that maybe there's more out there than what's inside these walls?" I was reeling, feeling the pieces click together. "Cut the crap, Paul. You're cheating." He didn't even flinch. "You want to know why?" he said, his chest puffing up. "Because around her, I'm somebody. Not just the guy who pays the bills or the bad guy 'cause he ain't Mr. Rogers." "So that's it?" I edged back, feeling the counter dig into my hips. "Your family's not enough for you?" Paul snorted and grabbed his beer again. "It stopped being enough a long time ago. Maybe if you'd have kept up with yourself, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere." The bile rattled in my throat. "I'm not the one who promised till death do us part." His laugh was short and punched the air. "Those are just words, Marie. They stopped meaning anything to you a long time ago." I should have been crying, but the tears wouldn't come. I was just empty and angry. "I gave you everything, Paul. I gave you a son, I made a home for us. And this is how you repay me?" He took a long drink, then leaned back against the counter. "You gave me a home? Looks like a prison to me. Same old, every damn day. You think that's a life?" "We made vows, Paul," I shouted, my voice cracking. "Yeah, and you broke them every day with your sweatpants and constant nagging." His face twisted into something ugly, something monstrous. That was the last thing he said before I walked out, my heart numb, anger seeping into every corner of my being. I was on edge the whole ride over to Paul's folks' place. It was gonna be nasty, but I had to lay it out for them. They needed to know who their son really was. His mom answered the door, with a happy smile. "Marie, What brings you here at this hour? I just barreled past her. I gotta show you both something. Once his dad came in, I played them the video straight up. His mom gasped, her hand flying to cover her mouth. His dad, red-faced and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, he barked at me, "Paul's gotta stop this nonsense now." And like that, all hell broke loose. That night back at our place, Paul kicked off as soon as I walked in. "You had to drag my parents into this, didn't ya?" His voice was loaded, ready to fire. "Yeah, well someone's got to," I shot back, my nerves steel. He was a storm brewing. With a step towards me, his hand raised, but he didn't get far. "You're bad." Jack's voice cut through, strong and braver than any of us. Paul stopped stone cold. Paul's hand dropped, and his mask slipped a second, shock in his eyes. But then he hardened up again, cold as steel. "I want you out," he said, spitting the words like they were sour. "Take the kid and go." So we went. With Jack's hand in mine, I didn't look back. Bags thrown in the back of the car, we headed for the city, miles of road unwinding like my thoughts. The luxury house was something else, my unexpected inheritance. 2 stories, white columns, and a porch you could throw a party on, all waiting in another city, away from everything that had gone wrong. None of my folks, not even a whisker of Paul or his clan, had ever set eyes on it. When we pulled up to this grand house, Jack's face pressed to the window, eyes as wide as the moon. "Is this a castle?" His voice was a whisper, almost lost in the vastness of it all. "Something like that," I said, a laugh escaping me for the first time in. I couldn't even remember. We stepped into that house, our new beginning. It was silent, save for the echo of our footsteps on the marble floors, bouncing off the high ceilings crowned with crystal chandeliers. The furniture was swanky, left behind by folks I wish had lasted a lifetime longer. I plopped down on a couch soft as clouds, and finally, Jack's laughter filled the rooms. The sound of it was more luxurious than anything else in this place. We explored room after room, Jack running ahead like he was leading a parade. Each new door opened to a room grander than the last. "I call the biggest one," he declared, claiming a bedroom that overlooked a garden already blooming with the promise of spring. Laying him down to bed that night, the day finally caught up with me. My eyes burned with the tiredness of it all, but looking around at the high ceilings, the gold trimming catching moonlight, I knew we were worlds away from where we started. Sitting there, in the quiet of a room too nice for today's shadows, I whispered into the darkness, "We made it, kiddo." Life in the big house slowly shed the shadows of the past. Jack's giggles filled the halls more than the echoes of old fears. Most days, it felt like we had always been there, just the two of us, in our new safe haven. The house, with its silent strength, was keeping the world at bay until the day Paul showed up, uninvited and unwelcome. He was at the door in a storm of anger. I opened it and there he was, looking like trouble had followed him around. "You can't just disappear with my son, Marie." I leaned against the door frame, unfazed. "He's my son too. And I didn't disappear. I moved on." Paul's scowl deepened. He glanced around, taking in the opulence of the place with wide, disbelieving eyes. "How can you afford this? I know you don't make this kind of dough." I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. "Well, turns out I had a little left over each month. Who knew?" He raised an eyebrow, a sly accusation in his gaze. "And I'm struggling to cover rent for that old place by myself. It's damn near impossible now that they jacked up the price." I shook my head. He always was good at playing the martyr. "That's not my problem anymore, Paul. I've been using my own savings to cover the gap in the rent for years. Savings that, thank God, I don't need to bleed dry for that house anymore." The greed in his eyes flared up like wildfire. What, and you're living here in luxury while I… Stop right there, I cut in. This isn't your concern. This, I motioned to the grand house behind me, is mine. Mine and Jack's. Paul took a step forward, but I didn't back down. Look, I came here to fix things. I'm saying I forgive you for all this, sneaking around. His audacity almost knocked the wind out of me, but I had a little surprise that would put the brakes on his charade. From behind the door, I pulled out the divorce papers and slapped them into his chest. And here's what I'm saying. We're done. He looked as if I'd slapped him with a physical hand, his face twisting through confusion, rage, and then settling on calculating desperation. You can't do this. What about Jack? I stood taller, my resolve like iron. I'm doing it for Jack. He doesn't need this chaos you bring. Sign the papers, Paul. It's over. He glanced from the papers to me, then back again, his posture deflating slightly. You'll regret this. You can't make it alone. That's where you're wrong. I smiled, not from humor but from a deep-seated confidence. I'm already making it. And without you, we're doing more than just fine. We're thriving. With a shake of his head, Paul looked like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. Instead, he turned on his heel and strode away, clutching the papers like they were a snake that could bite. Once he was gone, the house seemed to exhale with me. I closed the door gently, turning back to the life I had fought so hard for. Life had a way of tossing stuff at you, hard and fast. It was Thursday, the kind of day that should have been easy, but it wasn't. We shirked dinner for a bit, setting up ramps out of old books and watching the Lego car stupidly do flips and land upside down. Jack's laugh was infectious, the sort that wiped clean the worry lines off my face. His enthusiasm was a reminder that amid all the crap, there was still good, simple, unadulterated good. Then it came, a banging on the door that made my stomach drop and my face lose all its motherly warmth. Paul had a knack for bad timing and worse entrances. I pulled the door open and there he was, looking like he'd just come from a bar fight or lost a bet. Paul, what's up? He scowled, that usual look he gets when he thinks the world owes him. So, this the high life? You playing house with my Jack while I'm scraping pennies just to get by? Jack peeked from behind me, a knight in Lego armor. Hey, screw off, Paul. Don't talk to my mom like that. Paul's face turned a nice shade of tomato. The hell? You let him talk like that? I stood there, hands on hips. He's expressing himself. Something I should have done with you a long time ago. Jack came out from behind me, all fierce. Yeah, get lost. My mom, my rules. Paul's anger was something else, a storm that had nowhere to go. You think you're smart, huh? Talking to your old man like that. Jack squared his shoulders, a small David to Paul's Goliath. Don't gotta think. I know it. Mom knows it. Paul opened his mouth, but nothing came out. There was Jack, staring him down, waiting. This was no place for Paul anymore, no place for his bluster and noise. After a tense moment, Paul shook his head, muttered something under his breath and stormed off the porch. Jack turned to me with this look, the kind of look that said, "We got this." I nodded, all the agreement he needed. We went back to boiling pasta and racing Lego cars. That's how we do it, simple, nothing fancy. We just keep on. I was gabbing on the phone with Miss Dottie, Paul's mom, who was more my family than is now. Honey, you just holler if there's anything you need, 'kay? Her voice was always a warm blanket over the line. We're all good, Miss Dottie. Really, couldn't be better, I assured her, twisting the cord around my finger. She hummed a pleased note. Just makes my heart full to hear that. Keep on keeping on, you hear? Frank, her husband, yelled from somewhere behind her. Tell her that any time she wants to send over some of that lemon meringue, we won't complain. A genuine laugh burst out of me. Expect a pie on your doorstep soon, Frank. Exchanging a few more pleasantries, we hung up. I shook my head. If someone had told me last year I'd be mining gold from the wreckage of my married life, I would have laughed in their face. Jack pulled on my sleeve, waving his drawing like a five-star general. Look, Mom. This is our house. I looked down. His scribbles had heart. A big square house and two stick figures, a little one and a tall one, with sloppy grins and a lopsided sun shining down. The swing I'd put up for him stood out in green and brown strokes. That's us, right? A dumb question, really, but it made him nod with pride. And I'm gonna sell my art, make us rich. There was serious conviction behind his toothy smile. If you do, you're buying me that fancy coffee I've been eyeing? I nudged him with a wink. He nodded, his expression all business. Only the best for my mom. And just like that, the knot in my chest loosened a bit more. Sundays were like that, full of little miracles. The thing was, life had done a real number on us, but it was looking up. Paul got slammed by the door he let hit him on his way out. The fancy house he rented to impress his mistress turned out to be a couple of sizes too big for his wallet. Now he was cooped up in a tiny apartment, the kind of place his pride wouldn't have let him consider a year ago. And the mistress? She hightailed it the minute his pockets turned up empty and his promises hollow. But that was a tale for some other time. Right now was about Jack and me, and the park we were marching to, hand in hand. We stepped out, and the door clicked shut, a soft full stop to one chapter before immediately kicking off the next. Jack tugged me towards the park, his excitement bubbling over. I didn't glance back at our home, no need. Ahead was everything that mattered, me and my boy, parts of a world that kept on spinning, even when you felt like you'd fallen off.
I'm Kristen, and until recently, I thought I had it all figured out. Tom and I had been married for 2 years, living in a beautiful apartment in a nice neighborhood. We both had good jobs. I worked at an advertising agency, and Tom headed sales at a sports nutrition company. Our plan was simple: save for a house, then start a family. We lived frugally, sharing one car. Every morning, Tom dropped me off at work before heading to his office. I'd make my own way home in the evenings. It wasn't always convenient, but we were determined. Then Tom's sister, Sarah, came to visit with her 2 kids. She was a single mom. Her husband had died in a car accident. Tom's parents, my in-laws, were super protective of her. They were always trying to make sure she didn't feel lonely, which is why they sent her to stay with us. When Sarah arrived, Tom was over the moon. "Isn't it great to have them here?" he said, helping with her bags. I nodded, trying to match his excitement. "Sure, it'll be nice to spend time together." At first, I thought Tom's attention to Sarah and her kids was sweet. He played with the children, listened to Sarah's problems, and bent over backward to make them comfortable. As the days passed, Tom's focus on Sarah intensified. He started demanding that I put her needs first, too. "Kristen, can you help Sarah with the kids' laundry?" Or, "Why don't you take Sarah shopping? She needs to relax." I was exhausted from work and now had to cater to Sarah's every whim. The breaking point came when Tom said, "Kristen, Sarah's going through a tough time. We need to make her stay as comfortable as possible. Can't you be more understanding?" I stared at him, disbelief washing over me. "Tom, I'm trying, but I'm tired too. I work all day, then come home to cook and clean for everyone. I need a break too." He frowned, clearly unhappy with my response. Sarah's a single mom. She needs our support. You should be more sympathetic. As I watched Tom fuss over Sarah and her kids, a sinking feeling settled in my stomach. This wasn't just a visit anymore. Something had shifted, and I wasn't sure I was going to like where it was heading. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah showed no signs of leaving. I was exhausted, both mentally and physically. After long days at the ad agency, I'd come home to cook for everyone and clean up the mess. Tom's constant criticism was wearing me down. "Kristen, Sarah doesn't like spicy food. Can't you make something else?" Tom complained one evening. I bit my tongue, fighting back tears of frustration. "Tom, I'm doing my best. I'm tired too, you know. Sarah's with the kids all day. She's exhausted and has no time to cook," he shot back. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. "I understand that, but—" "No buts, Kristen. We need to support her." I nodded silently, not wanting to start another argument. I got it. I really did. Sarah was going through a tough time, both mentally and physically. But I was tired of Tom's unfair reproaches. I couldn't wait for things to go back to normal. One evening, as I was scrubbing dishes after dinner, Tom dropped a bombshell. "Kristen, we need to talk," he said, leaning against the counter. I dried my hands, bracing myself. "What's up?" "Sarah's thinking of looking for a job here in the city," he said, a hint of excitement in his voice. I froze. "Oh? That's unexpected." "Yeah, isn't it great? But here's the thing," he continued, not noticing my discomfort. "I think you should quit your job and take care of the kids in the house." The dish I was holding slipped from my hands, clattering in the sink. "What? You can't be serious." Tom frowned. "Of course I am. Sarah needs to work, and someone needs to watch the kids." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Tom, I'm not quitting my job to take care of someone else's children. That's not fair." "Fair? What's not fair is expecting Sarah to manage everything on her own," he snapped. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Okay, let's think about this. Where is Sarah planning to live if she gets a job here?" Before Tom could answer, Sarah walked into the kitchen, a smile on her face. "Oh, didn't Tom tell you? I'll be living here, of course, with my amazing brother. He understands me, supports me. I couldn't ask for a better brother." I stared at Tom, my eyes demanding an explanation. He shifted uncomfortably under my gaze. "Look, Kristen, can we discuss this later?" he said quickly, avoiding eye contact. "No, Tom, we need to talk about this now," I insisted, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm not okay with this arrangement. We can't all live together. It's too cramped in this apartment for 5 people. Tom's face lit up, as if he'd just remembered something wonderful. "But honey, don't you see? This is perfect. We were planning to buy a house anyway. Now we have even more reason to do it sooner. There'll be plenty of space for everyone." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Tom, that's not the point. We can't just—" But he cut me off mid-sentence, his attention already elsewhere. "Sorry, Kristen. We'll talk later. I promised the kids I'd play with them." And just like that, he was gone, leaving me standing in the kitchen, mouth agape, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. From that day on, everything changed. Tom stopped driving me to work, always with the same excuse. "Sorry, babe. I'm really busy this morning." I knew he was lying, but I couldn't prove it. So I found myself commuting on my own, both morning and evening, adding extra stress to my already hectic days. One afternoon, I came home early from work, hoping to get a head start on dinner. Instead, I walked into chaos. Sarah was sprawled on the couch, eyes glued to some trashy reality show, while her kids ran wild. Sarah, I said, trying to keep my voice level. What's going on here? She barely glanced up. Oh, hi, Kristen. The kids were bored, so I let them play. I looked around in horror. The walls were covered in crayon scribbles. There were mysterious stains on the couch, and my beloved houseplants, the ones I'd nurtured for years, were knocked over, soil spilling across the floor. This isn't playing, Sarah. This is destroying our home. I couldn't keep the frustration out of my voice. Sarah just shrugged, her eyes already back on the TV. They're just kids, Kristen. Lighten up. I took a deep breath, counting to 10 in my head. Sarah, I thought you were looking for a job. Have you had any luck? She waved her hand dismissively. Oh, I've sent my resume everywhere, but nothing good has come up yet. They all want too much work for too little pay. I'm not desperate, you know. I bit my tongue, holding back the retort that threatened to spill out. Of course she wasn't desperate. She had a free ride here, with Tom and me footing the bill and doing all the work. That night, as Tom and I got ready for bed, I tried one more time to talk sense into him. Tom, we need to set some ground rules. Sarah can't just let the kids run wild like that, and she needs to start contributing to the household chores. Tom sighed, looking exasperated. Kristen, Sarah's going through a tough time. Can't you cut her some slack? Slack? Tom, I've been cutting her slack for weeks. Our home is being destroyed. I'm doing all the work, and you're acting like I'm the unreasonable one here. Keep your voice down, Tom hissed. You'll wake everyone up. Look, I know it's not ideal, but it's family. We have to stick together. As I lay in bed that night, listening to Tom's soft snores, I couldn't help but wonder, when did I stop being part of this family? And more importantly, how much longer could I keep living like this? As days turned into weeks, the situation at home only worsened. Tom seemed oblivious to the chaos his sister and her kids were creating. Whenever I tried to establish some order or ask the kids to clean up after themselves, Sarah would run to Tom with complaints. Tom, I overheard her one evening, her voice dripping with fake concern. I don't think Kristen likes the children. She's always yelling at them, forcing them to clean. They're just kids, you know? I waited for Tom to defend me, to point out that basic tidiness wasn't child abuse. Instead, I heard him sigh heavily. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'll talk to her. That night, Tom confronted me in our bedroom. Look at this place, Kristen. It's a mess. If you can't keep it clean with the kids here, maybe... Maybe what, Tom? I challenged, already knowing where this was going. Maybe you should consider quitting your job. If you were home full-time, you could keep the house in order without putting so much pressure on the kids. I laughed bitterly. So now it's child labor to ask kids to clean up after themselves? Tom, do you hear yourself? But he wasn't listening. He'd been pushing this agenda for weeks now, and I was exhausted from fighting it. You know what, Tom? Fine. You want me to quit? I quit. His eyes widened in surprise. Really? You mean it? I nodded, a plan already forming in my mind. Yep, I'll call work tomorrow and tell them. Tom's face broke into a wide grin. He hugged me tightly, not noticing how stiff I was in his embrace. Oh, Kristen, this is great. You'll see, everything will be better now. The next day, I did call work, but not to quit. I spoke with my boss and explained that I needed to take a 3-month unpaid leave for family reasons. Thankfully, I'd recently trained an intern who could cover for me. My boss was understanding and approved my request. When I told Tom I'd quit, he beamed with pride, shooting a triumphant look at Sarah. See? I told you Kristen would come around. She understands the importance of family. As I watched them share their moment of victory, I felt like a stranger in my own home. But I reminded myself that this was temporary. 3 months. I'd given myself 3 months to see how this situation would play out, to see if Tom would realize the mistake he was making. The next morning, as Tom left for work, he kissed me on the cheek. "Have a great day at home, honey. I know you'll do a fantastic job." I forced a smile, waving as he drove away. Then I turned to face the mess that awaited me inside. Sarah was already on the couch, TV remote in hand, while her kids ran around, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. From the day I quit my job, my life transformed into an endless cycle of chores and childcare. I'd wake up at dawn, prepare breakfast for everyone, pack Tom's lunch, and then spend the rest of the day cleaning, cooking, and looking after Sarah's kids. Meanwhile, Sarah lived like she was on a perpetual vacation. Days blurred together in a haze of domestic duties. Sarah would swan out of the house, off to shop or meet friends for coffee, leaving her children in my care without so much as a backward glance. I'd watch her drive away in Tom's car, while I was left stranded at home, juggling housework and childcare. Tom, for his part, seemed oblivious to the imbalance. He'd come home, kiss me on the cheek, and ask, "How was your day, honey?" As if I'd chosen this life, as if I was living my dream instead of his sister's. One evening, as I was serving dinner, a meal I'd spent hours preparing while Sarah napped, Tom made an announcement. "So, Sarah's birthday is coming up next month," he said, grinning. "I've got something special planned." Sarah clapped her hands excitedly. "Ooh, do tell!" Tom shook his head. "It's a surprise, but clear your schedule for the evening of the 15th. On the evening of Sarah's birthday, we all piled into Tom's car and headed to LeBlanc, the most expensive restaurant in town. It was the kind of place Tom and I used to dream about going for our anniversaries, but always decided the money would be better spent on our house fund. Tom's parents were already there when we arrived, cooing over Sarah and barely acknowledging my existence. As we settled into our seats, I couldn't help but feel like an outsider looking in on this family celebration. Throughout the meal, the conversation revolved around Sarah, her struggles, her strength, her dreams. I sat quietly, pushing food around my plate, feeling increasingly invisible. After the main course, Tom stood up, gently tapping his glass for attention. "I'd like to make a toast to my incredible sister, Sarah. You've been through so much, and you handle it all with such grace. I'm in awe of your strength." Sarah beamed, soaking in the praise. Tom continued, "And to celebrate your birthday, I have a special surprise." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. For a split second, my heart leaped. Was this all an elaborate ruse? Was he actually going to surprise me with a gift to thank me for my sacrifices? But then he turned to Sarah and held out the box. "Sarah, you've mentioned how hard it is getting around with the kids. So..." He opened the box, revealing a set of car keys. "Happy birthday, sis! Your very own car, just like you've always wanted." The table erupted in applause and exclamations of delight. Sarah jumped up, hugging Tom tightly. "Oh my God, Tom! I can't believe it. You're the best brother ever." I sat there, frozen in shock. A car. He had bought her a car. My mind flashed back to all the times I had mentioned needing a second car, all the times Tom had said we couldn't afford it, that we needed to save for our house. "Tom," I said, trying to keep my tone even, "can I ask why you bought such an expensive gift for Sarah?" The table fell silent, all eyes turning to us. Tom's smile faltered slightly. "Well, Sarah needs a car. She has 2 kids, and it's hard for her to get them to the park or the doctor. Plus, she'll need it when she starts working soon." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "And what about me? I've been asking for a second car for months." Tom's expression hardened. "You're at home all day, Kristen. You don't need a car. The injustice of it all hit me like a physical blow. How much did this car cost, Tom? He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. $20,000. The room started to spin. 20,000? Where did you get that kind of money? Tom cleared his throat. I took it from our joint account, but don't worry, I'll put it back as soon as I get my bonus at work. Something inside me snapped. You took our savings without even discussing it with me? That was our house fund, Tom. I want you to return that money right now. Kristen, Tom's mother gasped. How can you be so selfish? Your sister-in-law needs this car. But I was beyond caring about their opinions. Years of frustration poured out of me. Selfish? I've given up everything for this family. My job, my dreams, my identity. Tom's face was red with anger. If you're going to be so greedy and inflexible, fine. I'll take out a loan and put the money back in our account. Happy now? No, I shouted, beyond caring about the scene we were causing. I don't want you taking out a loan. I want you to sell the car and put our savings back where they belong. Sarah, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. See, Tom? I told you she was controlling. She's trying to make you henpecked. Tom's parents nodded in agreement. Kristen, his father said sternly, you need to learn your place. Tom is the head of the household. I felt like I was drowning, surrounded by people who didn't see me as a person, just an accessory to their perfect family narrative. Tom stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. That's enough, Kristen. You've ruined everyone's evening with your behavior. Don't you know how to act in public? Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I stood up, grabbing my purse. I'm leaving. Good, Tom shouted, no longer caring about the other restaurant patrons staring at us. Get out! You ungrateful freeloader. I'm the one who earns the money in this family, and you should be obeying me. Maybe if you got a job, you'd have a right to an opinion. His words hit me like physical blows. I wanted to scream that I hadn't actually quit my job, that I was on leave, but the words stuck in my throat. What was the point? They'd already made up their minds about who I was. As I walked out of the restaurant, I could hear Tom continuing his tirade. She lives off my hard work and then has the audacity to question my decisions. Can you believe it? The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside, tears finally spilling over. I had never felt so humiliated, so angry, so done. I arrived at our apartment, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. The nanny looked up in surprise as I burst in, tear-stained and disheveled. I went to our bedroom and pulled out my suitcase. With mechanical movements, I began packing my clothes, toiletries, and a few precious mementos. I left a note for Tom, brief and to the point. I'm staying at a hotel. Don't try to contact me. The hotel room was small and impersonal, but it felt like a sanctuary. For the first time in months, I could breathe without feeling the weight of expectations and disappointment crushing me. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, replaying the evening's events in my mind. By morning, I knew what I had to do. As soon as the law offices opened, I made an appointment with a divorce attorney. Sarah Garcia came highly recommended, known for her fair but firm approach. Mrs. Johnson, she said, shaking my hand, tell me what brings you here today. I poured out my story, the gradual erosion of my marriage, the financial betrayal, the public humiliation. Sarah listened attentively, taking notes. Based on what you've told me, she said when I finished, you have a strong case for divorce. Your husband's actions with the joint account are particularly concerning. Let's draft the initial paperwork. Over the next few days, I threw myself into creating a new life. I found a small apartment, not far from my office. I called my boss and explained the situation, asking to end my leave early. She was understanding and welcomed me back with open arms. As I settled into my new routine, I hoped for an amicable divorce. I wasn't out for revenge. I just wanted what was fair. I suggested mediation to Tom, thinking it would be the quickest and least painful way to end things. "I'm not asking for much," I told him during our first session. "Just return the money you spent on Sarah's car, and we'll split the remaining joint account 50-50. Tom scoffed. "Return the money? That car was a gift to my sister. You're being ridiculous." The mediator tried to intervene, but it was clear Tom wasn't budging. After 3 fruitless sessions, I realized we'd have to go to court. The next few months were a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and court appearances. Tom fought me every step of the way, painting me as a gold digger trying to rob his poor sister of her much-needed vehicle. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the judge made her ruling. The court finds that Mr. Johnson's use of joint funds to purchase a vehicle for his sister without the consent of his spouse was illegal. Mr. Johnson is ordered to reimburse Mrs. Johnson for half the value of the vehicle, as well as legal fees. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It wasn't about the money. It was about justice, about having my voice heard and my rights recognized. Tom's face was a mask of fury as we left the courthouse. "I hope you're happy," he spat. "You've gotten your pound of flesh, you greedy, petty woman." Over the next few weeks, Tom complied with the court order, transferring the money to my account. I later learned he'd had to take out a loan to cover it, but I couldn't bring myself to feel guilty. He'd made his choices, and now we both had to live with the consequences. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I had settled into a comfortable routine. My small apartment had become a haven, filled with peace and the simple joys I'd forgotten during my tumultuous marriage. I'd rekindled old friendships, thrown myself into my work, and even started a small herb garden on my balcony. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when I heard an unexpected knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I approached cautiously and peered through the peephole. My heart skipped a beat when I saw Tom standing there, looking disheveled and anxious. For a moment, I considered pretending I wasn't home, but curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the door. "Kristen," Tom said, his voice hoarse. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, then nodded, stepping aside to let him in. He looked around my apartment, taking in the cozy, organized space. "You look good," he said softly. "The place looks nice." "Thanks," I replied, my guard up. "What brings you here, Tom?" He sank onto my couch, running his hands through his hair. I messed up, Kristen. I see that now. I came to apologize and, well, to ask for your help." I sat in the armchair across from him, waiting silently for him to continue. "I lost my job," he blurted out. "The company downsized, and I was let go. I'm still paying off the loan for Sarah's car, and I'm barely making ends meet. Sarah, she refuses to sell the car or get a job. Says she's not ready yet." A part of me felt a twinge of satisfaction at hearing this, but I pushed it aside. "I'm sorry to hear that, Tom, but I'm not sure how I can help." He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "The apartment is a disaster. Sarah doesn't clean, and the kids are out of control. The landlord's threatening to evict us because of the noise and mess. I realize now that you were right about everything. Sarah's not just going through a rough patch, she's taking advantage. And I let her." I sat there, taking in his words. The vindication I felt was bittersweet. Yes, I had been right. But at what cost? "Kristen," Tom continued, his voice breaking, "I know I don't deserve it, but I was hoping maybe we could start over. I've learned my lesson. I miss you, miss us. Maybe with your help, we could fix things. For a moment, I was transported back to the early days of our marriage. The love, the dreams we shared, the future we'd planned together. But then I remembered the betrayal, the humiliation, the months of feeling invisible and unvalued. I took a deep breath. Tom, I appreciate your apology, and I'm sorry you're going through a tough time. But I can't go back. His face fell. But Kristen, I've changed. I see things clearly now. I shook my head gently. The thing is, Tom, I've changed too. These past few months have shown me what I'm capable of, what I deserve. If you betrayed me once, who's to say you wouldn't do it again when things get tough? I wouldn't, he insisted. I've learned my lesson. Maybe you have, I conceded, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm happier now. I've found freedom in being on my own, in making my own choices without having to consider a partner who doesn't value my input. Tom's shoulders slumped. So that's it? There's no chance for us? I stood up, signaling the end of our conversation. I think it's best if you go, Tom. I truly hope things get better for you, but I'm not the solution to your problems. You need to stand on your own 2 feet and make your own choices. He nodded slowly, getting to his feet. At the door, he turned to me one last time. I really am sorry, Kristen, for everything. I know, I said softly. Goodbye, Tom. As I closed the door behind him, I leaned against it, letting out a long breath. A mix of emotions swirled within me. Sadness for the dreams we'd once shared, a touch of schadenfreude at Tom's comeuppance, but most of all, an overwhelming sense of relief and freedom.